International at retreat in June of 2018. Little did he know that his faith would be tested. He would be on death's door before summer's end. When he was at rock bottom, he was touched by an angel who was present at one of the most pivotal times in his life and showed up again to help save his life. Steve's story of faith, love, positive mindset, and determination will have you on the edge of your seat, walking away with a new perspective on the curveballs that life can throw your way. Please join me in welcoming.
Oh, that was good. That was almost like I wrote it. All right, is this working? Can you guys hear me? All right, awesome. So good evening, everybody. Men of Malvern, Saturday night, 8 o'clock. I'm really honestly pleasantly surprised at how many of you guys showed up tonight, because you just had meatballs, right? Penny, I've been going to retreat for over 25 years, so I know the whole routine, right? You got fish on Friday, you had scrambled eggs with like paper thin bacon this morning, and home fries. The rookies have to go up and make the toast. So I actually changed up my talk tonight, and I'm going to talk about the history of the green envelope. All right. We're going to go through the origin of the green envelope, right? The vendor selection process over the last 100 years. They've gone offshore. They've dealt with little mom and pop shops. The different color choices. It hasn't always been green, right? So there's a psychology around it and how they ended up at green. Of course, the infamous green envelope revolt of 1983, and then that a lot of experts call it the best money collection process in the world. You guys weren't supposed to get the joke that fast, okay? So I'm just kidding. We're not going to talk about green envelopes. I could see some people are like, oh my God, I got to pretend like I have 8:15 adoration and get out of here. So what's that? I had to wake you guys up, right? So again, my name's Steve Grandizio. I've been coming to retreat for 25 plus years. I'm a 6-3 group retreating, which is Father's Day weekend, 6-month, third weekend. Back in the day, we had 300 plus retreatants when I first came back in the 90s. And now, our numbers have dwindled, but we've done a pretty good job continuing to recruit. So I'm going to start by, I'm going to talk a little bit about mindset. We're going to talk about mindset, miracles, some things that have happened to me over the years, and Malvern and how they all kind of tie together. So hopefully we'll be able to inspire you guys for, a great night and a great rest of retreat. I know we're right at the tail end of retreat, but hopefully I do my job and you guys don't force me to talk about green envelopes. So one of my favorite quotes is by Walt Disney. He said, "All the adversity I've had in my life, all my troubles and obstacles have strengthened me. You may not realize it when it happens, but a kick in the teeth may be the best thing in the world for you." Now, I was fortunate enough to get my first kick in the teeth at a very young age. When I was 6 years old, my dad left. I'm the youngest of 5, and my parents were separated. My dad was a bad gambler, and not just bad at gambling, but he had a bad addiction to gambling. And as a 6-year-old, how many here have young kids? Anybody have young kids? Anybody have 5, 6, 7-year-olds? Anyone? Okay. So 6 years old, parents are separated. I would wait on the couch and wait for my dad to show up. He would come every Wednesday, pick me up, go out. Of course, like any good dad would do, he'd bring you to the toy store, let you pick something out. We'd go to dinner, and then every other weekend. And one weekend, he just stopped showing up. He stopped showing up. So fortunately, my mom remarried and married an amazing guy when I was 8 years old. And in fact, he's the one who recruited me to Malvern. So in the yellow shirt here is my stepfather. He's been coming to Malvern for over 40 years. And over the years, he's roped one by one my brothers. I have two brothers, two stepbrothers, brother-in-laws, brothers-in-law, nephews, our kids, friends, and we've grown our retreat. In fact, this past month, we had our largest group ever. So as Malvern kind of shrinks and your retreat shrinks, we had 15 guys at our retreat last month, including, talk about recruiting some of the young guys, 5 of my nephews and my son for the first time. So how many people are here for their first retreat? Awesome. Okay. How many people have been here 5 or more years? 10 or more years? 20 or more years? Uh-oh. How about 30? 40? 35. Wow. Over 40 years. How many have you guys been here? How many years have you guys been here? Over 48. Anybody more than 48? 50? This is your 50th? Wow. 55. Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing. That's awesome. So we've had some amazing retreats. Again, we had 15 people this past year. Again, 5 of my nephews and my son. And I'm going to start my journey and some of my retreat stories by reading you an excerpt from a poem from this scrapbook that I received 19 summers ago, almost 19 years ago, almost. In August, it'll be 19 years. And I encourage you to listen to every word, okay? I'll tell you a little bit about the young author who penned this. But if you have to close your eyes, close your eyes. It's going to be quick. It's entitled, Always Remember. You should always tell people that you love them. You should love a lot. Make a lot of wishes and tell people your wishes because that's how they come true. I don't know what that is. Have ambition. Be strong. Never settle. Ask for help. Give compliments. Never envy others. Make every person you can feel special. Don't dwell on the past. Just learn from it. Feel bad for those who try to put you down. They only lack something within themselves. Being unhappy is just a waste of time and energy. Hate is a very strong word. Appearances are very deceiving. Chasing temporary highs will never make you truly happy. And last but not least, do not take a single moment or person in your life for granted ever. Powerful words, and they were written by a young woman who was 21 years old, and she was in the summer before her senior year of college, and she was pregnant and about to give her baby up for adoption. Think about, some of us may be tougher than others, but think about the summer before your senior year of college. For a lot of us, it didn't get much more complicated than, should I go down the shore this weekend? And here's this young woman who could have been thinking all these negative things, right? Could have been saying, my gosh, I'm 21 and I'm pregnant. This is the worst. It's the summer before my senior year. My first summer being 21 where I can go out and have fun with my friends, and I can't go out and party. It's the worst. How many here have used the phrase, this is the worst, or it's the worst? For like trivial things, right? It could have been yesterday coming out here. How many people traveled on the Schuylkill, right? Or 95, or the Turnpike, or the Blue Route? How many people have this summer already fought traffic to go down the shore? How about the 105 heat index days? They're the worst, right? So many times we use the Phillies losing to the last place A's last night. It's the worst. They won 11-5 today, if anybody has been unplugged. But it's the worst, right? And here's this young woman who could have had a it's the worst mindset and perspective. And instead, she chose to deliver this incredible gift, not just to us, but to her then unborn child. She came when we went to pick up our son. He came with 2 letters, one written by the birth mom to him, one written to the birth mom to us, and this scrapbook. And the scrapbook's filled with quotes from Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa and Gandhi and all these incredible notes like that to her son, who she may not know if he ever is going to see it. She didn't know if we were just going to throw it away when we got it. And even if he did see it, it may be, 15, 20 or more years down the road before he saw it. So, I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all slip into, I know a couple people kind of did this about it's the worst, but we all catch ourselves falling into that kind of mindset. And the one thing I know that's true, because I do it too. The one thing I know is true is, sometimes there's going to be things that are hard in life, and sometimes they may be the worst. But I know what's true 100% of the time is you get what you think about. And if you're thinking about everything's the worst, bad things are going to happen. So, and I slip into that mindset throughout the year, and I use retreat kind of as my reset button. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but this is almost like a New Year's when I come to retreat. I'm a big, any Jimmy Buffett fans? So one song, Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes. I listen to it every time I come out to retreat. And the first line of the song is, I took off for a weekend last month just to try to recall the whole year. And that's retreat, right? Taking out for one weekend to be able to just recall the entire year. And at the center of a great retreat is adoration. I'm assuming, I checked the board, I think the last adoration is 8:45. So everybody here has gone to adoration, right? This weekend. No? You're still? Oh, you're 8:45? Oh my God, you better hurry up. All right, I got to speed up. So, and I love adoration, except for the days when it was perpetual and you would check in, and then after fish dinner on Friday night, you would go to check the board, kind of like you were in middle school checking if you made the baseball team, right? You go and look at the board, and you were looking for your name, and you were just hoping and praying for a good time. And sometimes you would get that like 3 o'clock in the morning slot. Who's had that overnight slot before when it was perpetual? Yeah, that's the only time I didn't like adoration. Other than that, adoration is really at the center again of, what's that? Oh, adoration is really at the center of that reset button that I have every year. And 2005 was one in particular that stands out. So my stepfather, who we affectionately call Pops, he was the CA captain that year for our group. And we had, back then we'd have a couple hundred, 250. I mean, we had big groups. And he was the CA captain, but we were missing one big retreatant from our group, and that was my stepbrother. His wife was pregnant with their first son, and he lives in Florida, so he didn't make his way back up because she was going to have birth Father's Day weekend. And I got a great adoration time that year. It was somewhere between breakfast and lunch, so it was good. I didn't have to move anything around. Let's call it 10 o'clock. And I just so happened to be right after my stepfather. So if you guys are familiar with that bench at the end of the hall, right? You kind of sit on the bench, and the clock's above you. The oratory's down at the end of the hall, and my phone buzzes. And this is 2005, right? So I had a flip phone. If there's any young guys don't remember those. I had a flip phone, and I just started. '05 was when I first started getting texts. I wasn't really good at text. I would do the initials that only kids do, just to not have to type so much because my fat thumbs weren't working. And my phone buzzed, and I get a text from my stepbrother in Florida telling me that my nephew was born. And he gave me some of the details, and I quickly looked at my watch, and I had a few minutes before I had to go into the oratory. So I ran down the hall, went to my room, and grabbed a piece of paper, ripped it off, and just wrote a little note. Because again, I was after my stepfather. So I needed a way. I didn't have time to go tell all my siblings. I needed a way to kind of send a smoke signal and let them know that my nephew was born. So, oh, there it is. So I went in to retreat. You walk into the oratory, right? You sit in that second waiting room, almost like a doctor's office, and you kind of hang out and wait. And I had that note in my hand, and I just waited for my stepfather to get done. And he finishes up, does the sign of the cross. He gets up, and as he's getting up to leave, I hand him this folded note as he walks out the door. And I could just feel, the magic that was happening here. Here's actually the note. So it's funny. My stepfather was the CA captain. He wrote the wrong date here, so don't look at the look at the year. But that's on his dresser to this day. He framed it. That was the note that I folded up and gave to him on my way into adoration, on his way out of adoration. And so then I went in and I knelt, and I was excited about my nephew, but then it was quiet, and I was praying about my own situation. My wife and I have been in the adoption process for 4 years. How many adoptive dads out here? Anybody? Nobody. One. Awesome. How many kids adopted? One adopted. Any others? 2 others. Okay. Yeah. So I used to be on an adoption charity board, and the one woman had some who she adopted and others who were biological. And she would tell people that she had some that were takeout and others that were homemade. So I'm sitting there praying, and I'm in the oratory all by myself, and I start thinking about our adoption process. And we had been in the process for 4 long years. This was Father's Day weekend, '05. We started August of '01. So we were coming up on 4 years. And the week prior, my wife and I had made the decision to go overseas for adoption. And when you we adopted through Catholic Social Services. When you opt to go overseas, it's no longer a wait. It's just a process. So once you fill out the paperwork to go overseas, you're off the domestic list. And we thought, gosh, it's been 4 years. Our file had been shown twice. Nothing had ever happened. So that Thursday after retreat, we had an appointment with our social worker, the same social worker who gave us this, with our social worker, Emily. And we were going to fill out paperwork to go overseas for our adoption. And it's funny because we plan, God laughs. So Monday after retreat, we get a call from Emily. She says, listen, I know we have the appointment on Thursday, but we just got a call from our birth mom who is pregnant. She's due August 13th, and she wants to see 3 files, and yours is like right at the top of the list. And she's coming in Thursday, the same day you're scheduled to sign that paperwork. Do you want to keep that appointment, or do you want to punt it and go for one more shot to get chosen? So of course, we choose to, maybe the 3rd time is a charm. And Thursday comes, and the birth mom comes in. She looks through 3 files, and the next day we get a call from our social worker, actually the manager. The manager had been our social worker and kind of moved up into management. So this was Emily's manager, and she calls on Friday and says, "Are you guys ready to change diapers?" And think about it. I walked into that oratory for adoration knowing that I had a nephew who was just born. I had no idea that we were about to have a baby right after. So on August 10th, 2005, 7 weeks after my nephew Brady was born, and that, by the way, that I wrote really fast back then. I had like just a few minutes. That's not Chio, it's Chip. His name's Chip. I need to go back and take that out of the frame and correct it. But 7 short weeks after Brady was born, his best friend was born. My son Marshall. This is the two of them. They're 7 weeks apart. They are like two peas in a pod. There they are with my daughter. So both my kids are adopted, but they're not even cousins. They're cousins technically, but they're brothers. Neither of them have a brother. They are brothers. They're best friends. They talk all the time. I could have put 1,000 pictures on here. They're now rising sophomores in college. They both came to their first retreat this past year. And all of that because I was open in adoration to hearing it. And I didn't go in there asking for anything. I just said, Lord, I trust you. What should we do? We have this appointment on Thursday. You let us know. And he poured himself into our lives and into our heart. So I'm going to challenge everybody. I know we're at the end of retreat, but there are a lot of quiet places out here. And I've had retreats where I didn't really hear or listen to God. I just kind of went through the motions. And believe me, the Grandizio Donahue crew is probably one of the loudest groups of any retreat of the 52 weekends with retreat. But having that little moment of silence. So I challenge you guys, take 10 minutes, either tonight or tomorrow, whether it's in your room. You can go to the oratory because after he's done, we got no more adorations, right? You can walk the grounds, go to the grotto, go to the overlook, go to the Pieta, walk one of the stations of the cross, and just be quiet. Go in silence, 10 minutes, and listen, because miracles happen here at Malvern, but you have to let it. And I'm not going to promise that a miracle's going to happen, but you have to give him a chance to be able to pour himself into your heart. So back in 2017, I mentioned that my dad left when I was 6 years old, and he was a bad gambler. Like I said, I was the youngest of 5. I am the youngest of 5 still. And I used to think my name was Rosemary, Richard, Tony, Diane, Stephen, whatever the hell your name is. That's what my mom used to call me. Rosemary, Richard, Tony, Diane, Stephen, whatever the hell your name is. That was my whole name. And my dad was, he was doing better when they got together and had me. And for the first few years, he was going to GA, Gamblers Anonymous. In fact, I remember going to banquets and I thought everybody had 1-syllable last names. There was Joe I and Ed B. I thought like last name was EYE and BEE, but it was Gamblers Anonymous. So everybody just went by their initial. And unfortunately, my dad had a relapse and was on the run, constantly on the run. In fact, my poor mom would get a knock on the door from the mafia asking for my dad, Tony, and because he owed them money. And then 2 hours later, she'd get a knock on the door from the FBI looking for him. And she's like, you should have been here 2 hours ago because the mafia was here at the door. And through the years, not only did he miss the good stuff, he missed weddings and birthdays and childbirths, but he also missed the funerals. Show you a picture. This is the one known picture of the Grandizio side of my family. So it's my grandparents right off the boat from Italy, from Capua, which is outside of Naples. And my uncle, right there, who I look like, and my 5 aunts and my dad on the side. And this is from 1953. It was my parents' wedding. And I didn't think of this as a still shot. I thought of this as this is a wedding, right? Even if we were going to pull together for a picture, right? We'd kind of like run and get in line for the picture. And I pulled this picture out because that day, my Aunt Rosie, who's right here, had passed away, and I went to her funeral. And I picked my mom up, went to the funeral, and that was in this picture. That was the 8th funeral that my dad missed. He missed his dad and his mom's funeral. He missed his Uncle Johnny's, his brother Johnny, my Uncle Johnny, whose only request on his deathbed was to see his brother, and didn't come true. He missed all 5 of his sisters, including my Aunt Rosie, who had her funeral was that day. And when I got home, I felt really nostalgic, but I had this pull to be able to go and start looking through pictures, and I'm flipping through pictures, and this picture right here is the only one with the 9 of them in a picture, right? They didn't have a camera at their fingertips back then. So the only time you'd get a picture is when you'd hire a cameraman. So a wedding. And this is the only picture that anybody on the Grandizio side of the family has of all of them. And I sat in bed that night, and I was staring at the picture, and I realized that my dad was the only one still alive, which kind of hit me differently than it had before. And I realized one other thing, that they died in the exact order in which they're standing. So my grandfather died first. My grandmother died second. My Uncle Johnny, who's not the oldest, he died first. The youngest, the baby, my Aunt Virginia, youngest of 7, died third. The oldest, my Aunt Ann, oldest by far, died fourth. There's my Aunt Rosie, whose funeral I went to earlier that day. And I realized that the black sheep in the family, the guy who's missed every single one of these, was the only one still alive. And for some reason, for the first time in 39 years, I felt like I had to go see him. And my wife comes up the stairs, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm staring at this picture. And she says, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I said, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I think I want to go to Vegas." You guys could he lived in Henderson, Nevada for 30 years. "I think I want to go to Vegas, and I think I want to see my dad." And she said, "I've been telling you that for 20 years. She probably did. I just never heard it. So I have an older brother. I'm the youngest. So I reached out to a couple of my older siblings who had some contact, who chose to have contact. Some of us just had no reason really to have contact, and others had some contact with them. Not direct contact, but just phone calls here and there. So I had an ability to be able to get to them. So I had the discussion with my wife. I call him. I tell him I'm coming out. We had a long conversation on the phone. I could do a long time just on this and this trip. And I went out to Vegas. Give you a funny story, and then I'll rewind for a second. When we went out there, I went there on Valentine's Day, which is crazy, but Valentine's Day of 2017. And I landed, went right from the airport to his place, and we sat down, we talked for a while, and then we went out to lunch. And I said, "Hey, come on, let's go to lunch." And he was in a walker. He was in his 80s. He was in his walker. We rode down the elevator. We get to the parking lot, and you could tell he's kind of looking around like, "All right, what car are we getting in?" And a car pulls in the parking lot. Guy comes out and says, "Hey, Steve." I say whatever that guy's name was. He pops the trunk. We fold the walker up. We put it in the back. I open the door, I put my dad in, I go on the other side, I get in, and we pull away. And he leans over to me and he goes, Stephen, where did you have this driver? He had no clue what Uber was. And he's probably thinking, this is a guy who's gambled his whole life thinking, cha-ching. Like my son has a driver out here in Vegas. Like, maybe we can go in the high stakes poker game tonight and he could kind of fund me. So before I traveled out, I called my stepfather. And part of the reason why I never really gave it any thought or wanted to go seek him out was almost in respect for him. He's the guy who I played baseball. He's the guy who hit me fungos and fly balls and brought me to games and did all that stuff over the years. And I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't want him to feel jealous. So I call him and I said, Pops, we call him Pops. I said, do you have any advice for me? And he said, yeah, do two things. Get your picture taken with him, which I did. There's my picture with my father, 2017. And you guys will be floored by the second part. And see if he wants to come to retreat this year. I'm like, all right, I'll get my picture taken with him. I am not inviting him to retreat. And think about that. Like, think about how, zero ego whatsoever in that answer. Zero jealousy whatsoever in that answer. And all the things that I had been thinking all those years about not hurting his feelings, he was like, yeah, get your picture taken with him and see if he wants to come to retreat. And he was dead serious, dead serious. If I would have brought him to retreat, he would have been like, oh, hey, Tony, I've heard a lot about you. So needless to say, he didn't come to retreat. But I'm going to challenge you guys that if that 6-year-old kid who was abandoned can 39 years later go out and bury the hatchet. And I didn't go out there looking for answers. I didn't go out there with any agenda whatsoever. I spent 2 days with him and I didn't want to be disappointed. So I didn't want to go looking for answers that I may be disappointed in. I just wanted to go and spend some time. And I never have regretted it. Never have regretted it. How many people here have somebody with whom they've lost touch? Friend, kids, siblings, parents, grandparents, grandkids? Do yourself a favor. Reach out to them. Be the bigger man. Reach out, bury the hatchet, see if you can get together. Don't have any agenda whatsoever. I guarantee you, you won't regret it. I'm going to play just one thing, hopefully. So later that year, I got the only voicemail I ever got from my dad on my birthday. And let's see if this.
Stephen, happy birthday. I knew I probably couldn't get you, but today is your birthday, and I'm really sorry in my life that I missed all your birthdays, all of them. It's hard to believe, but I do, Stephen, okay? And my own heart did. That never stopped.
So I'll let it go there. But that's something that I'll keep forever. I'm so glad that I did it. Again, I didn't just do it for myself. I did it for him. I did it for, he passed away just a couple years ago, but I did it for all my siblings too. None of them had any contact with him in a long time. So I think it was incredibly therapeutic. And I encourage everybody, if you have that person, I know there were a lot of hands that went up. Think about it, reach out. You don't have to have the perfect script. You can just say, hey, listen, I just wanted to reach out. I was thinking about you. I was at retreat this weekend and I heard a speaker and I felt like I needed to reach out to you. So last, and I know we're running a little short on time. Oh, let's turn this off. Is John did a good job kind of introducing me. This is the really the speech that I talk about outside of retreat. So the other stuff I talk about a little outside of retreat when I do keynotes. This one I always talk about when I'm outside of retreat. And it was 2018. So 2018, I arrived at Malvern and I just wasn't feeling right. And I was a 6 a.m. gym goer. I've been a 6 a.m. gym goer for 20 years. So I just kind of chalked it up. I had a really busy week. I was coaching my son's baseball team, long days, head hit the pillow at 10 o'clock, back up at 5:30 to go back to the gym. So I just figured, you know what? I'm just a little run down. We're out in the field. It was the middle of the night. It was a day like this. It's hot. And I started getting goosebumps everywhere. So I said, guys, listen, I'm going back to my room. Went back to the room, popped a couple ibuprofen, and went to sleep. Pulled the covers up because I was freezing and went to sleep. Woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. That went on all weekend. It was kind of during the day, I just felt like blah. But at night, I would spike fevers. Monday, I went to urgent care, and they said, oh, it's probably the flu. You know, flu can last 7 to 10 days. Come back if you still don't feel well after 10 days. Long story short, that went on for 33 consecutive days. 33 days of fevers, headaches, loss of appetite, and extreme fatigue. I was a 6 a.m. gym goer. I was waking up at like 8:30, not even seeing my kids before they went to school. And I was crashed on my couch at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon every day. Every single day. And every day I thought, all right, tomorrow I'm going to feel a little bit better. During that time, I went to 4 different doctors, had my blood drawn twice. I went to an infectious disease specialist, and they tested for all the usual suspects: mono, Lyme disease, West Nile virus, all these crazy things, like a slew of things, all came back negative. Finally, I got 103.5 fever. And on day 34, I decided to go to Jefferson. I live in the city. I went to Jefferson's ER. They admitted me right away, and they started running a series of tests. Any doctors? I know there's a doctor here somewhere. No, nobody? Oh, wow. Just one. They started running a series of tests, and one of those tests was blood cultures. And they found overnight, I get a knock on the door, and the doctor tells me that, good news, we found bacteria in your blood. We're going to start you on IV antibiotics right away, and you should start feeling better in a couple days. And he was right. Within a couple days, fever gone, headaches gone, appetite was back. I was eating cheesesteaks every day and trying to put weight back on. At this point, I was like 20 pounds light just from being sick for over a month. So I started saying, listen, can I get out of this place? Like, let me out. And they said, hold on. When you get bacteria in your bloodstream, there's 2 places that it can go, typically your heart or your brain. So they started running a battery of tests on both. One of those tests was a transesophageal echocardiogram. It's basically a fancy word for a camera down your throat. So they did that. And then they released me for a weekend on the antibiotics, but they wanted me back right after the weekend on Tuesday to come back in and have the test again. And I thought, dude, I was good. Like my appetite was back. I was sleeping well. Like I was fine. But went back in on Tuesday. I was so confident that my wife came, my kids came. My son, Marshall, was 12. My daughter was 8. And they came with me. And they knock you out for that particular test. And I remember waking up, and the cardiac radiologist was this far from my face, telling me that I needed open heart surgery. And my 12-year-old son went running into the hospital crying. My wife chased after him. My daughter put her head in my lap, sobbing. And I sat there thinking, I'm usually a positive guy. And I looked for the silver lining, and then it hit me. About 12 years prior, I had started this co-founded this charity with my stepbrother, who's down in Florida, called Little Smiles. He runs the Florida operation. His Villanova and buddy and I started the Philadelphia, the local operation. And we had seen a ton of sick kids over the years. We're kind of like a mini Make-A-Wish on a local level. And it hit me right away that I was the lucky guy. How many people have had kids who are sick? How many parents here? A lot of parents, right? Every single one of us, if our kids were sick, we'd go to bed every night praying to give it to us, right? So immediately I thought, man, I'm the lucky guy. I don't have to go to bed at night praying to take this from my kid. I got it. I'm good. I can handle it. As long as my kids don't have it, I'm good. So I kept repeating, better me than my kids. And that was what kind of kept me sane throughout the process and got me ready for what was about to come. So my surgery was scheduled for August 9th, the day before Marshall's 13th birthday. So the day before my son's 13th birthday. And I met with the surgeon, and the surgeon told me that because of where the infection was lodged between my aortic and my mitral valves, that there was about a 10 to 20% mortality rate with the surgery. So I said, all right, just one request. Give me something that puts me on a different planet the night before and the morning of. Like, I want to be thinking about polka dot puppies and pink unicorns and green envelopes. So they gave me Ativan. I don't know if anybody's had Ativan, but fantastic. Highly recommended for that situation. And I don't remember the night before. I don't remember the morning of, but they wheeled me from my room at 7 a.m. and they wheeled me into cardiac ICU at 7 p.m. 12 long hours. During that time, they replaced my aortic valve and root with a mechanical valve and root. They patched where the hole was in my heart. They patched it with a bovine patch, a cow patch. They did a right coronary or a vein graft for my left leg and did a right coronary bypass. And I was healthy. I didn't have any problems with my heart. This was all just because it got infected. And 12 hours later, I was in cardiac ICU. And it's hard to even describe. I'm sure anybody had open heart here? So it's hard to describe how you feel afterwards. You're very weak. I was a pretty big, strong guy. You're collapsed because they saw your breastbone open, right? They put a separator in. They put you on a cardiopulmonary bypass machine, turn your heart and lungs off. And that's just to get to the surgery. And then they basically rebuilt my heart. So when I came out, I was sore everywhere. You're on medicine. I was there for 3 weeks, not seeing my kids. I just wasn't myself. And on the 13th, 4 days after my surgery, I got the hardest news I had gotten. I found this brick in the back. So when I came out of surgery, there was I had a portable pacemaker that was about this size. It had 2 wires coming out of it, 2 wires coming out of my chest, and I had to carry this thing around with me, not knowing if my life depended on it. You'd go out for walks every day, and you'd have to hold this in your pole and do these little walks. I mean, literally to the projector and back was my walk, and you'd be out of breath. And I remember getting news that I needed a pacemaker. And the doctor was sitting at the end of my bed. My wife was there. Again, I hadn't seen my kids in a while. I was emotional to begin with. I was watching Undercover Boss and crying on every episode. So he told me I needed a pacemaker. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I just couldn't stop crying. It just screamed old and unhealthy to me. And I was a former professional baseball player. I was in great shape, and I just didn't think of myself as old and unhealthy. And so I needed a sign. I needed an angel. Has anybody had an angel, not the wings flying angel, but just an angel come in, somebody come into your life when you needed it, like right at the right time when you needed it. Has anybody experienced that? You have? Or are you scratching your head? Yeah. Okay, cool. It's amazing. It's so funny because if I asked any questions to like a kindergarten class, they'd be like, oh, even if they didn't have the answer, they'd be jumping out of their seat. As adults, we're like, we know the answer is true, and yet we do that. So yeah, and I'm not picking on you. All of us do the same thing. So I needed a sign, and I get a knock on the door. And knocks on the door in the hospital are not, can I come in? Knocks are, I'm coming in. Like the door is opening while they're knocking. And every 4 days, you get 2 new nurses, a new nurse rotation every 4 days. And I'd been in 3+ weeks. So I'd had a bunch of different rotations of nurses. And this one was different. She comes in, it's just my wife and I sitting in the room. And she says, "You guys recognize me?" And we're like, oh my God, it was Emily, the social worker from when we adopted my son, the woman who gave us this 13 years, almost 13 years to the day prior. And crazy, 13 years ago, look what's on the front of this scrapbook that Emily handed us when we picked up my son. Remember, my surgery was the day before my son's 13th birthday. This is just a few short days later. She graduated. She went back from social work, back to school. She graduated from Thomas Jefferson University on May 22nd. I wasn't sick on May 22nd. She gets hired by Jeff. I get sick. She gets hired onto the cardiac floor. I get open heart surgery. She's my nurse for my last 4 days in the hospital. I'll show you this real quick. So this is about 3 weeks before I got sick. And that's a week after my surgery. I lost 40 pounds. I was over 230 pounds, down to 191 on my last day in the hospital. And here's Emily. These pictures are the same date, August 17th, 2005, when she came to visit a week after my son was born. She's holding Marshall in our house. And that's the day I got released from Thomas Jefferson, August 17th, 2018. Exactly 13 years to the date later. There are no coincidences, right? Like the odds are zero that this just happened. And she was our angel. She was our angel back in 2005 who helped us when I prayed in that adoration chapel for our son. And the timing of it, where the birth mom who created this scrapbook chose us on that Thursday when we were supposed to go to international adoption. And 13 years later, she was my nurse for my last 4 days in the hospital. Here's me getting released on August 17th. And one last thing, my faith and Emily were going to get put to the test later that night. It was the day before I had my pacemaker surgery. And again, PT would have you just walk the halls 3 times a day and come back. And I remember coming back from the last one. It was probably right around now. It's like 9 o'clock at night. And when you come back, there's 5 sternal precautions. You can't push off, you can't lift up. There's so many things you can't do because they don't want you to pop the wires holding your sternum together. So you just kind of sit there, and the nurses, you shimmy a little bit, and the nurses lift your legs up and shimmy you into bed. And my leg got caught, and the pacemaker came undone. My heart rate went from 80 to 20, like that. I felt every ounce of warmth leave my body. And Emily was right here. She could probably still feel me squeezing her hand to this day. The other nurse was on this side on her phone because there was a messaging system in the hospital, and she's trying to message the cardiologist who's who's the attending on the floor. And I looked down the end of the bed and I said goodbye to my wife. I thought that was it. Like I could feel everything leaving my body. And the funny story is, prior to that, I'd been in the hospital almost 30 days. I never wanted anybody to see see my butt, see anything. You know, you had that gown on. And then I was like, dude, get here and flip this bad boy up and fix this thing. I don't care who sees me. So thankfully, it was probably only a minute or two. The cardiac attending cardiologist was down in ICU. I was in the step-up unit. He ran up the stairs. He came flying in. I mean, there were like sirens and nurses coming in and out. And he came in, flipped my gown up, plugged the thing back together, and I went back up to 80 beats per minute. Next day, had my pacemaker put in, and again, got out on August 17th with Emily. So, guys, you know, I gave you a couple challenges. One, to, you know, to have some silence, to walk around and, you know, really listen, be open to a miracle. There are miracles that happen here at Malvern. They happen every single weekend. And, you know, life never stops kicking us in the teeth, whether it's personally, professionally. And the next time you get bad news, you know, you're going to think this is the worst, or you're going to realize that the best could be right around the corner. So I'm going to leave you with the ending of always remember. Do not take a single moment or person in your life for granted ever. Have a wonderful rest of retreat. Have a great rest of your 2024, and pros it.